Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming, and thank you very much, Rena, Uzma, Uthra and Nida for being here, and many thanks to Professor Kristen Pryder for joining us. My name is Jasmine Creed, and I'm a PhD student at the Slade, and will be chairing the Interspace seminar today. The talk is being recorded, and the session will be an opportunity for questions and answers. And thanks to Lee Collett for assisting the seminar itself. The Interspace seminar will explore insufficient exposure of South Asian British artists as a group in exhibitions. British women artists from ethnic minority groups, especially British South Asian women, are not adequately represented in exhibitions. The seminar will explore the reasons why, including racism and misogyny from within and outside British South Asian cultures. The seminar will identify strategies for readdressing this imbalance with input from artists, curators, and writers who have a leading role in the development of contemporary art through their practices, and would present their unique perspectives and experiences. The Interspace seminar will raise awareness of issues and facilitate the development of exhibitions and symposia, showcasing work by British South Asian women artists, including a consideration of this group not being a hermetically sealed group. The Interscape seminar has arisen from the Interworlds project, where I was project lead. Interscape explores the decolonisation of the curriculum and the museum, and how the transcultural contributes to contemporary art in its production and reception in art colleges, museums, galleries, and communities. It has developed from dialogues on decolonisation in arts at the Slade, University of the Arts London, the British Art Network, Asia Triennial Manchester, and the work of the Sarah Parker Ramon Centre at UCL on race and racialisation. The project explores the transcultural in art through inviting external speakers, Slade students and staff and others to contribute, including to the online talk series, with a long-term aim of an exhibition and a symposium. Kristen will now kindly introduce Rena Arya.
Great, thank you, Jasmine, and thank you for all of your organization of this extraordinary event. I'm going to introduce Rena Arya. Rena Arya will give an overview of British South Asian women artists from the 1980s to the current day by looking at themes that they've been preoccupied with and the challenges they have faced in their career. Many of these challenges persist, and it is imperative to address these head-on to ensure that progress is made for current and future generations. Rena will highlight the importance to look at the sense of evolution in the work across generations as a way of ensuring that the preoccupations that the first and second generation artists don't come to define emerging concerns. Rena Arya is a professor of visual culture and theory at the University of Huddersfield. She's the author of Francis Bacon, Painting in a Godless World, and Abjection and Representation, an exploration of abjection in the visual arts, film, and literature. She is currently working on a monograph about the cultural appropriation of Hindu symbols. Thank you. And Rena, now over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jasmine, for the invitation, and Kristen too. I'm delighted to be here. In my talk today, I'm going to be looking predominantly at the challenges faced by British South Asian women artists. So initially I was going to give an overview of the work as well, but I just thought it especially pertinent really to focus on the challenges, given, the talk's going to be 20 minutes. There's a lot to cover. And I wanted to sort of give an overview of the context, but focusing mainly on the challenges because they need to be discussed with some urgency in order to overcome the barriers faced for future generations. So my approach in thinking about the situation was to remain open, to consider various positions in an attempt to understand the situation that British South Asian women artists find themselves in, and not least to consider the journey in more than one sense of the word that British South Asian women artists have taken. The first generation of British South Asian artists were the daughters of migrants who settled from countries in South Asia, which included the regions of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, amongst others in the post-war period. They attended art schools in the UK in the 70s and 80s, mainly in England, and explored their fluid identity positions, being betwixt and between different cultures, a position which implied at times of not completely belonging to either culture, or at least a continuous sense of displacement. Many of them were preoccupied with issues about migration, and migration was central to the experiences of belonging and identity in its various shifts and dislocations. A common practice too was to look at aspects of their respective South Asian culture, that the ethnic and cultural differences that they embodied. And they faced a situation of double oppression, sexism from patriarchal attitudes within their own culture and outside their culture, and racism as well. South Asian culture has socially prescribed roles for women, and whilst these aren't static and society has undergone great reforms in some aspects of the culture, within the 80s, South Asian women did not have the liberty to make as many decisions for themselves. This often took the form of having to conform to certain expectations about arranged marriages or particular roles within the household, such as the rearing of children. And South Asian women artists during the 70s and 80s used the space and creativity afforded to them to reflect and negotiate their identity positions. So when we're looking at work from that period, it's especially about this sense of identity, about a sense of not completely belonging somewhere, and about thinking about their identity in relation to the host culture and other perspectives about migration. This isn't the case now, I should add. And this is one of the reasons I'm problematizing the role of the identity tag of South Asian women artists, because if we were to look at a survey of work from the 70s right up to the current day, we'll see different themes emerging, a lot of them cutting across one another. So what I'm trying to do today is to make the case that South Asian women artists have overlapping preoccupations, but to also acknowledge that the identity category is very fluid and should be accommodating of difference, and that we need to think very carefully now about how we can conceive of these differences moving forward in order to support contemporary South Asian women artists and future generations. So to look at the work of South Asian women artists in the 1970s, we see a lot of work about issues to do with migration. This does need emphasising. The work produced by these individuals is not simply of relevance or interest within the art world, but more broadly within British post-war migration histories. If we can move to the next slide, please. So socially and politically at the time, in the 70s and 80s, these artists became known or identified as a part of a bigger group of visible ethnic minority artists that would come to be known as Black British artists. This umbrella term encompassed artists whose origins were from other parts of the world, such as the Caribbean, and this group was also inclusive of male artists. A word about the term of identification is needed. In the 70s and 80s, the term Black was not used as it is today, where it refers to people from African and African Caribbean backgrounds. At the time, it was a political term that united all non-white people through a common experience of racism. That's one of the advantages of the term then. It provided a collective identity and consciousness that united visible ethnic minority artists. This umbrella term grouped these artists as a shared collective where they used their art to express their difference and to fight structural racism. But it was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, grouping together en masse enabled the artists to share and pool resources, another advantage. On the other hand, however, so it gave them heft to work together. But on the other hand, it ended up flattening the very real identity differences that existed in the group between their ethnic backgrounds and other aspects. So this is one of the problems, the perennial problems of having a category. It's going to include and exclude, and it's going to, invariably end up flattening differences, even if we acknowledge that the category itself admits of degree and is within a spectrum of differences. So it was damaging to assume that their socio-political experiences of racism, isolation, journeys of migration were homogenous. The lumping together was compounded by the way in which the work was exhibited. If we move on to the next slide. So work at the time was often disseminated via the survey show, community-based projects. There were few solo shows and few exhibitions in mainstream galleries. So this, obviously there was kind of advantages to being exhibited, and it wasn't the fault of the artists for making the decisions about about where to exhibit. They were limited by choices due to the unequivocally white spaces of the art world that shunted them out from mainstream venues or exhibitions. However, the presentation of work can be seen as detrimental. The community-based focus conceived of the work from the functional perspective of engagement, of helping communities, rather than thinking about the work in and of itself. This, some could say, created a different ontology for the work that distanced it from the institutions of art. The survey show conveyed the range of work and artists, so in that respect, it was good, but it enabled the capacity to explore, but it disabled the capacity to explore the work of individual artists in depth. One of the consequences of the survey show is that artists became known for particular celebrated works, but this did not satisfactorily showcase other works. Within the group of Black British artists, there was also the problem with power dynamics within the group. One manifestation of this was the way in which women were marginalised within the group. This was the rationale for the seminal show, The Thin Black Line. So if we move on to the next slide, at the ICA in 1985. Curated by LeBay, and the show was to rationalise women in Black art. Many accounts of the history of Black art, such as Rashid Areen's curatorial endeavours, attempted to counter the historiography of Western art, but failed to overturn the hegemony of representation because those accounts marginalised the contribution of women artists. So let's fast forward to where we are today with British, South Asian women artists. The group of Black British artists, once a political grouping for all visible minority artists, a locus of collective identity and action, was fraught with problems. So as with any category, the inclusion of some implied the exclusion of others, and it ultimately became fractured because of understandings about its identity. There were some people who used the term divisively, only in application to those of African descent, whilst others used it more inclusively to lambast the imperialism of Western art history. A further issue involved being burdened with the impossible task of speaking as representatives. In the contemporary art world, the category Black British is still used with reference either to this historical moment from the 80s, but also as a way of framing the work that certain artists from the group, such as Sonia Boyce and Keith Piper, have been engaged with. So in 2016, for instance, Sonia Boyce was involved in a project looking at the impact that Black artists have had on modernism. The category, although many may see it as defunct, is useful as a springboard of more reformed thinking. But what's happened inevitably is that because of the way it's used currently, South Asian, especially South Asian women artists, have been kind of completely marginalised. So they're left effectively homeless in a way, and this is one of the objectives or remits of, you know, the series of talks, and this is really what I wanted to focus on, really. So when we're thinking about a group identity, one of the downsides of not having one, whether formally or informally, is isolation and marginalisation, given the continued whiteness of the art world, which is inhibiting to artists from visible ethnic minority backgrounds, and not just, you know, ethnic minority backgrounds, but minority backgrounds in general. We have to, you know, be frank about the, you know, the elitism of the art world. Diversity, as you know, is more and more on kind of the radar, and inclusivity, but there's a long way to go before there's a long way that we need to sort of travel there. But the question is, what categories or groups should be formed in order to accommodate the needs and aspirations of South Asian women artists? Because I strongly believe that until this is done, then the work of South Asian women artists will be scattered, and or detrimentally will focus on the work in the 80s and not think about the priorities and issues today. So that you know, we come back to the kind of question about whether there should be a category today that accommodates these perspectives. If it was South Asian women's identity, from the perspective of identity politics, there are a number of other attributes that would need to be, you know, taken into consideration that look at intersectionality, and, you know, bearing in mind that they sometimes cut across each other. So I'm not sure how useful that would be. And there are further problems with an identity tag that groups people together by ethnicity. Firstly, there's the, if we move on to the next slide, there's the issue about identification, which includes self-identification. Some South Asian women artists may not choose to identify as such and may prefer their work to speak for itself. So that takes us to the first point on this slide. The problematics of a group identity that is defined by one's ethnicity is that artwork often becomes seen through the lens of ethnicity. And with that, there are assumptions about the type of work that it includes. In other words, the art, the assumptions are that the art is about one's identity or the identity of one's group. So what if you know, you have the situation where a South Asian woman artist doesn't want to make work about her identity, wants to make work about other things? Does it belong in this category? Is that an essential criterion for it, you know, being described as South Asian work, that it has to be about identity? So we're thinking really about kind of essential criteria here. So these are kind of part of the problematics. The artwork becomes seen through a particular lens. There are assumptions that are made. There's the impact of other variables and how they fit together, given that we know that categories, identity categories, are fluid. They're not, you know, sealed off. And then, you know, with self-identification, you may get artists saying that, you know, they who actually want to distance themselves from the label because they feel that it might be detrimental to their career. They don't want to be seen as being part of an equality or diversity agenda, and they want, you know, their identity to be distanced from the work. I know Anish Kapoor, for instance, in a lot of his interviews, he really, to give an example of a well-known artist, he really does distance himself from, being seen vis-a-vis his identity, and wants his art to really communicate everything that he has to say about himself. So an alternative term that works potentially, if we move to the next slide, is diaspora aesthetics. That term is not my own. It was first developed by Stuart Hall in 1990, and then by other commentators such as Paul Gilroy in 1993. And I think it's not dated, and it still works now, because it resists the claim that culture develops along ethnically absolute lines, and proposes that the development occurs instead in complex dynamic patterns in which definitions of identity emerge from different places within the diaspora. So what's good is that it opens up an exchange between the country of migration and the host country, allowing for this fluid movement that it isn't necessarily linear. And it recognises the journeys undertaken by visible ethnic minority artists who assimilated different parts of their cultural background. It recognises that migration is still ongoing, and that people people migrate for lots of different reasons, and that migration is not always permanent. So it recognises this fluidity of movement. It allows for the multiple transitions made by artists who may have been exiled from their home country, such as British South Asians from Uganda, who at once are African, South Asian and British, acknowledging that for some artists there's, migration has occurred more than once. And this plurality of vision gives rise to an awareness of simultaneous dimensions. The category of diaspora also allows for collective experiences shared by people from that particular region, from that diaspora, while simultaneously allowing for other influences. So this shift from thinking about South Asian to diaspora aesthetics moves away from the tendency where the meaning of the art is overdetermined by its politics, and where more emphasis is placed on the artwork rather than necessarily the socio-political identity of the artist. That's not to say that isn't the narrative, and diaspora accommodates these different viewpoints. So it's a shift that is more all-encompassing, and it allows for the impact of socio-political differences and accommodates generational and other differences. So when we're thinking about current British South Asian women artists and future generations and what their preoccupations are or might be, diaspora aesthetics allows for the different relationships and claims they might have on their ancestral origin. Thank you very much.
That was great, Rena. There's so much to think about and talk about as well. Now, our next speaker is Uzma Sultan. Uzma Sultan will explore how her gestural and visually crowded paintings show the process and questions of abundance. Paintings have much to do in being in different parts of the world, the fact that we live in a condition of hybridity. Uzma Sultan is a Pakistani-British artist who lives and works between London and Berlin. She attended the Chelsea College of Art, Wimbledon School of Art, and then studied for an MFA at the Slade School of Fine Arts, UCL. Sultan has exhibited in both group and solo shows across Europe and in her native Pakistan. She exhibited her works in the Beat Painting Prize Biennial in 2020, the Elysium Gallery in Swansea, UK, and the Ing Discerning Eye exhibition in 2020. Most recently, she was one of the winners of the first newsprint Open 2021 and will have an exhibition at 3 Works in Scarborough. great. And over to you, Usma, now.
Hi. Hi, thank you, Jasmine. Thank you for the introduction. And first I want to say thank you so much for actually inviting me, because this is actually my first Zoom. So please bear with me if I if it's not according to what you expect or whatever. And also how am I looking, everyone? I'm on camera also. Okay, let's start with this. I'm not actually going to say too much, but it's because as it's all visual work, so I want you to actually just look at the paintings, and I'm going to talk about my processes, how I work and how I get my images and where I get my material from. So I'm actually going to start with really older paintings, older work, because I find the newer works, people can access them on on social media anyway these days, and yeah, Instagram or website or whatever. So I'm going to be starting with my, yes, can I have my first, please? Yeah, yes. So these are the actual, the paintings that I actually painted after leaving the Slade. These are early, maybe early career, first 10, 12 years of my practice, where I had my first studio in London. So this is I get my material, I take photos myself. And at that time, actually, wasn't even I was taking some photos, but a lot of them were from lifestyle magazines. So, or actual places like shop merchandise, how, this is actually in Selfridges, where they had this is in the early 2000, 2005. I think this painting is 2007. So they had a kitschy account, section of where they display furniture and vintage area. So I took a picture of that and I do not want my paintings to look like the photo. So I do not show the photos at all. So they are only, for my, part of my sketchbook, or it's only for me to see. So that's not my intention. It's not my intention to make it photographic or anything like that, or to make a political or social commentary. So I distance myself from all of that. And why I wanted to paint this, because I had I'm not interested in people at all. So they don't interest me. So the people actually in my paintings are part of a painting or part of a picture. So, I wanted to paint this because it's the famous sketch artist, Trechin. Yeah, Trechin. His work is there in the painting, and I found it quite beautiful. And actually, he died quite recently after that. So anyway, that artist. So, okay, can we go to the next one, please? And the way I paint is I paint on different surfaces. So the first one that has just gone was on aluminium, although you can't tell that it's been painting on aluminium. And people have to really look up close or touch it in order to find out what the surface is painted on. This is on canvas. It's a large scale. I carried on painting really large canvases after the Slade. Then it became a storage issue. So I turned my scale came down and all that, as with all artists. This is from a lifestyle magazine. It's one of the weekend supplements you get in London. I found them really useful. So in there was so they the images are picked at random. They do not mean anything to me apart from the fact that I want to paint them, basically. That's all. So this is a green room, again, reminiscent of Matisse's red room or whatever. So, next. And then part of the earlier works as well were from parts of my own house. So, but this is quite a recent painting, actually. It's not that old. It was only completed in 2020. Although how I work is I leave paintings abandoned for more than a year, even 2 years at a stretch. So they are started actually earlier on in 2018 or something. And then by the time I get to it and finish it, so. And in the meantime, lots of other paintings happen and get finished. So this is how I work. And this is actually my own bathroom in Pakistan. So yeah, like, so I do go back to, parts of my own house, which I hadn't done since being at the Slade actually. So this is the pink bathroom. And this is also an aluminium. Next, please. They're all actual places, as I have said. And this is another surface I work on, which is plastic. It's like a vinyl, patterned vinyl. And it's a plastic, or you can call it plastic tablecloth, which I actually buy in rolls. I buy it from Pakistan and I bring it over. And they're all different patterns. So each time it's a different pattern. I'm getting whatever was available in the market at that time. So like I stretch it just like canvas, and I paint on it. And this is a Victorian room from the Jeffrey Museum, which is now called Museum of the Home. They changed the name after refurbishment. So this is a Victorian room, and actually they changed quite a lot in that. So I have actually 2 paintings in this section, which I can show you. The other room is not even around anymore in the museum. After refurbishment, they got rid of it. I don't know why, because that was actually the best room. And in this, what I've done is like, I've tried to, usually I don't add my own. The way I paint is I let the paint drip and all that. I don't add like parts of my own identity or who the artist is. And also like whether female or whatever. I don't let that show at all in my work, I think. But in this one, actually I have, because on the left-hand side, you can see part of an ajrak, which is like the traditional textile found in Sindh, Karachi, where I was born. So it's like in the dyes, they use natural dyes like burgundy. It's always burgundy blue or cream color. So I added that on the left-hand side. So, and you can see part of the plastic as well, the pattern. It's showing as well. So a bit like a collage, but again, it's stretched like canvas. So, but I always use oil, so everything's oil. And the next one. And why I'm showing this painting is this one is actually the first large painting I did after graduating. And this is a vintage, again, from a lifestyle magazine, vintage room. Again, a large painting. And on the right-hand side is like, I've used a pastel. The picture is actually painted in soft pastels. So, okay. Next, please. Okay, this is like 2011 or 13 painting. I'm painting shrines now. So going back to my home city of my birth, Karachi. This is like a very popular shrine actually near my house. Like this was shown in the solo show I had in Pakistan. So, I just wanted to think more about the location where my work is going to be shown then. So it's a bit like, I did a bit of like, site specific kind of work, because I'm showing in a city where like, so I wanted people to connect to what I'm painting as well. So this is a like really popular, and actually I'm actually quite lucky that I have these paintings and some of the pictures I took from that shrine, because if you go now, they have completely redone it and it just looks very awful. So I think a lot of people have complained they put so much money in it and they have ruined it basically, both from the outside and inside, because inside they ended up putting Turkish tiles instead of these, very authentic Sindhi tiles, really beautiful. I'm not saying it's not like beautiful anymore from inside, but it's just lost its identity of its origin and, of its history basically, and what it's actually about. So I'm actually like quite happy that I have had this painting, that I made it at that time. Okay, next. Again, this one, and like I was also painting from my travels. So wherever I travel, this is in Istanbul, But again, I think this was from a lifestyle magazine as well. So yeah, it's from the pavilion in Istanbul. And I used gold is, you can't really photograph it very well, but it's all gold there. It's the paint, gold has been used like a color, a bit like Klimt, how he used, yeah, gold. Yes, and on the left-hand side, you know, I was interested in painting mirrors, so I painted that. And again, this, you can't see the surface it's painted on, but again, it's on pattern vinyl. So unless you see the sides, or from the sides, it's visible that what it's painted on. You can see the pattern. Next, please. Okay, and then now this is like a bit more of the recent stuff I've been doing. So I had this again from a picture that I have. And it's from a it's a store again, but you know, I didn't make it look like this, just like, you know, taken the picture and I've just redone it. I've added my own like sandals in it, which I bought at that time. I actually like really liked the style of it, so I thought I would just you know, again, to do with identity, put a bit of me in it, and have those sandals. It's like, and what I find weird is like a lot of the times the things are local, but they add like just to sell things, they add the country of origin is written as different. So on the sandals, they've written made in Thailand, and I have no idea why they would do that, basically. So it's like, that's why I think to question that, made it into a painting. And next. Again, that's also on a pattern bind. Okay, so I'm moving on to my my next stage is like why I have been painting like that. So I wanted to get away from the rooms and that aspect of it, and like, you know, paint a bit more in a different way. Or I actually did residencies, but part of my practice is painting in different locations. So a lot of these paintings, which I'm going to show now, have been either made in Pakistan or they've been made on a residency in Berlin. And so I'm going to show a few here. Next. Yes, this was actually like, you know, it wasn't painted on a residency, but it was made in Berlin. This is not such an old painting. It's only 2019 painting. And I took 4 canvas boards, and like the point is of painting that is like whenever I go home, I actually become a tourist in my own city or country. And I'm like fascinated by it. This is like just, it's only a supermarket, and it's the way they have displayed it is like so chaotic. And I just wanted to like, I really loved it, the way they have done it. So I painted it. I didn't want to paint it on one single canvas or whatever. So I sectioned it off, like, you know, took 4 canvas boards and painted it on that. And I even used some spray paint on it. And this was painted in Berlin. So, and that's where my another space is, and that's where I am right now as well. I have a space here, which I keep coming back to. Yes, this was, I think it started in Pakistan and I finished it in London, this painting. Again, two separate canvases joined together. Again, I'm like commenting on like, you know, pop art or bat painting. It has notions to pop art, how, you know, they were painting cans of soup and Andy Warhol, how he did that. But, you know, I'm doing it in my own way and using the plastic vinyl and using, this is gloss paint I've used, and everything's oil. And it's about popular street food and like the way it's advertised and commercialized. So this is like a billboard or like outside, how they paint stuff and, you know, to commercialize it. And it's outside the shop. So again, this is like one painting, but painted in 2 sections. This also like actually in 2013, I had actually moved back to Pakistan. So I actually, you know, left my studio here in London as well, also moved out of my flat and completely moved back So this was painted there, Tibet Snow. So I was looking at, so while I was there, I didn't feel the need to actually go on making my rooms or like, you know, those kind of paintings, like still life and all that. So what interested me was the packaging, and like whether it's anything like, you know, cosmetics or like, or food or whatever. So I took that as a subject, and like, and this has like, again, it recalls the colonial history and colonial past, and that, you know, that is still there. You can see emblems of like, you know, parts of the colonial history of the city. And this is Tibet Snow again. It's like, and then they have these cosmetics with very obvious connections to. They even have a cream called in English and Fairness Snow and all that. And this is quite a large painting, again, on the patterned vinyl. It's like, I really enjoyed that because you don't need to prime it at all. It's very direct. You can carry on painting straight on it. Again, this is a recent painting. It is like, this was also shown in the Island Feeling, the exhibition at the Terrace Gallery in Leighton. This was one of the paintings. This is on aluminium now. And this was an image, again, I had left this painting abandoned and I finished it in the pandemic. I finished all the unfinished paintings during the lockdown. And so this was one of them as well. So, and I finished it. What interested me about this as well, I went to fill up my car and like in Pakistan, and this was actually like, it's a gas station, a petrol station, and the way it had like, you know, the way they had covered the gas station, it was like, it was actually funny and like amusing at the same time. It was like, well, and I really loved it visually so much, as if, you know, the petrol pump is wearing a sari or something. So I really, and these tents are amazing. You know, actually, we've lost some of these tents because now a lot of people are getting like really globalized and westernized, which is such a shame. I think mainly is globalization. A lot of the times, even the tents become like white now or just one single color, which is not good enough actually. So these tents are used everywhere, from any social gathering, from weddings to everything. And even funerals actually. So, but in funerals, actually, I think they're just white. Another one example of the shop, again, the shop, you know, the shop display paintings or whatever. This again was in a small market as well, which I discovered. I found this so amusing because they have like all these feminine hygiene products next to, they're selling instant noodle next to the feminine hygiene. I found it hilarious actually. It's like a bit of humor there, and there's baby milk, and again those cosmetic products as well next to it. So I just wanted to paint on it. This is painted on linen. So I keep going back to the traditional canvas or linen, you know, after I've, you know, but I think my favorite medium to paint on is aluminium, because the colors come out really vibrant on it. It's beautiful. Again, this is again to do with food. Food, again, like the markets, this is the pan. After dinner, people go at night, like they go and eat pan, which is like a mouth freshener. So the way they are displayed is like just so colorful. And yeah, and it's actually pan is actually quite a Karachi thing where I'm from. So like if you go to other parts of Pakistan, you don't find, I think you find, but not the way it's displayed in Karachi. So this is also on aluminium, the painting. Again, another one, this was actually painted, I think I started in London. This was painted also when I had moved back to my house in Pakistan. So this was painted there. So I have the chili sauce. I just find the packaging really beautiful, the way they package products, whether it's anything really. And then the popular street food snack, like, you know, and then a very, like in the front plate, there's a very European looking salad. And so I wanted to, and then I had this like in my library there, I had this little thing like this. You can see the Pakistan flag. It's like a little thing. So I wanted to add that in it because I was around it, not for any other reason. It's just like the room I was using as a studio. It was already there, so I added that. Again, some more views from the market or what you see outside on the roads. This one's, I titled it as Balloon Man, but you can see obviously it's like, he's carrying like children's like balls and all that. And the way he was carrying it was just so beautiful, I think, in carrying in that net. This was actually shown in the Affordable Art Fair, this painting, in the singular art, they represented me. So this was one of the, where I did also, I did live painting there. So next, this is on canvas too, canvas. And another one of the packaging paintings, this was painted in London. I think maybe this was the very first packaging painting I had. It's on aluminium. So it's again, Anwar Sob. And this is actually not from, this is from Lahore, which is like in the really old city where I went, and they had these soaps all stacked up. Really beautiful way, the way they have displayed it. It's near the Wazir Khan Mosque in that old area, old city. And when you go there, it's actually really quaint. The old part of town is really still the same. So it's really beautiful. So this is what got me started on the packaging paintings. And this is also on aluminium. Okay, and I'm going to be talking more now. The next set of paintings were all actually painted in Berlin. So where I did I've done a couple of residencies here, but now I actually have my own space here. So this was, I'm going to be showing that because it's relevant. Why I painted, because I found that I was not in another city or country altogether again. So I couldn't paint the same things as I'm used to. Also, like, I wanted to try to come out of my comfort zone. You can't keep doing the same thing or otherwise I get bored and the work becomes just too predictable, basically. So the next set of paintings were all like, again, I gave my own self some project about food and food packaging, and also looked at some local markets and the local markets, how food is packaged here in Berlin. So they're very good in can we move on to the painting? This is, yes. So this is, it's a small painting. It's on canvas. And this is like, what's called Gola Ganda over there, but it's actually called it's shaved ice, and it's got colored syrup on top. And they are just so beautiful. At night, it seems as if it's like you're actually in a circus, the way they put like colored lights on it, and it's just so amazing to see that. So I'm painting all the, how they write about it, and how they display it to sell it. And so next. So my paintings at this time, they became like food art. And this is like a painting of donuts. This is a picture actually my sister sent to me on WhatsApp while I was there, because Independence Day came. And so these are like Independence Day donuts. Now Dunkin' Donuts has been there for a fair amount of years, but not so long actually. It only opened in 2000. And while I was growing up, we never had that. We only celebrated with flags and all that. But this time, like, I was surprised actually, like, now it's everywhere. It's again, globalization. Now they have different ways of celebrating. So it's even on donuts, on sweet treats or everything. A bit like, how they have like the Queen's face on the cake over here on Victoria sponge. So it was like, found that exactly like similar, really. So this is like, they had the Pakistan flag on one. So this is a small square painting on canvas. And I've used spray paint on it because I'm in Berlin. So a lot of the paintings art to do because I'm surrounded by amazing street art around. So I have used spray paint in a lot of these paintings. This again, a traditional ice cream shop. Yeah, where they're selling these. And I enjoy writing these texts as well in my painting because because I say to myself, I mean, why not, you know? And the way my paintings are actually quite hard to photograph because you can't actually see the top red is really glossy. So I use gloss paint. So that doesn't show in the picture. Yeah. And it says kulfa faluda in Urdu there. So, and it says lache dar doodh, meaning milk, milkshake. So, and then with the English version, you can read Pepsi. And so, yeah, because I actually like that because this was in my open studios in the residency, and an Iranian girl came and she could read that. She says, "Oh, we also have faluda there." So, like, you know, it's like I'm interested in these cross-cultural commentaries and, like, you know, what people think about it. And the way I paint is like it's bad painting. I am interested in that. Paint is allowed to drip, so, and you can see all these squiggles and all that. And, you know, yes. And that's why, you know, when they had the Eileen Agar, you know, the exhibition, I could immediately relate to her, the way she's using the paint. Really enjoyed that exhibition because, like, you know, I was happy that somebody in the 1940s, she did it and I'm doing it now. So again, like, so I'm comparing with the markets here. So this is Bonbons in one of the flow markets in Berlin. So it's on Saturday, Sunday, they have amazing markets here, so, you know, especially in the summer. So this was in the summer. So again, these really beautifully packaged sweets and bonbons. So written, so with their names written in German. And this is on board, so it's on wood, this painting. Again, a popular street food there. So Pepsi, this is like Chart House. So it's like a snack with chickpeas and potato. And this is in the old town in Karachi. So again, this is on aluminium, and this is very glossy paint, or how it's the Pepsi and all that. And parts of it is oil paint. And some of the aluminium also like shines through this painting. Again, this is Frankfurter Kranz, so a very German cake. And what I find amazing about German baking is how high the cakes are. It's like the height of the cakes is amazing. They are very high, and they love baking here. So, so I had to like look in. And a few other paintings I haven't included because, you know, I couldn't include some are really like tiny small paintings of food, but, you know, I haven't included it. You can't show everything. So yeah, again, I was painting like curry, like, you know, in these utensils, and I just got really bored and I think it was I thought it was really boring, so I just spray painted it. It's like, so it's like it's an yeah. I enjoy using spray paint on top. Again, part of this is a big painting I painted with a lot of spray paint. Again, this is painted on pattern. While you can see on the left-hand side, the pattern shining through, coming through, and you can visible. So I made, and some of my more recent paintings, I'm trying to bring like animals in my painting because during the pandemic, I just like got in tune with nature. So, and then animals as well. So, but this is a 2017 painting. So can be relevant. Next. This was also painted there. So it's again on canvas, a small painting. What I find amazing is that you know, these paintings I find are like a bit like souvenirs. So they can be souvenir paintings, but a lot of them were painted here actually and ended up being back here again because, you know, some people like they bought it and it ended up being back in Berlin here again, or in another part of Germany, because I found that's interesting as well. Again, from a market here, one of the flow markets here. like a tea set. So I thought this one, because you can't get in Europe, you can hardly find any tea things at all, let alone teapots. So you won't find any here, basically. So I like that actually when I found it. So this is tea time, because it's all about coffee. That's it. And this is a small 50 by 50 centimeters oil on canvas. And I think this might be the last painting to show.
Brilliant, brilliant. Usma, thank you. There was a comment I noticed, Sana, who just said, love these, and I do too. So I was just kind of echoing. That was really, really fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to Uttara Rajagopal, who will consider how with the Art Fund New Collecting Award, she was able to purchase a collection of contemporary South Asian textile artworks made by women from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and the South Asian diaspora in England. The aim of this collection was twofold. Firstly, to bring a fresh narrative to the existing South Asian textile collection held at the Whitworth, which had originally been established during the time of British colonial rule, resulting in the erasure of the identities of the original makers. And secondly, to generate a conversation between the South Asian diaspora over here and those living in South Asia over there, so that the stereotypes and presumptions from within the communities can be challenged and begin to break down. So after a period of travel and research, artworks were acquired from the following artists: ArtPro in Bangladesh, Madha Acharya Baskerville in the UK, Kangan Arora in the UK, Suman Gujral in the UK, Arshi Irshad Ahmadzai in India, Yasmin Yahan Nupur in Bangladesh, Rahani Manji in Pakistan, Bharti Parmar in the UK, and Raki Teswani in India. By bringing together these textile artworks here and now, we can help foster a greater sense of belonging and celebrate a permanent place for South Asian women's voices in the Whitworth collection. So Uttara is an independent curator and has a specialist interest in South Asian textiles. And in addition to the project just described, in 2021, Uttara guest curated the group exhibition Rehang for Anand Art at Bikaner House in Delhi. And this year she was appointed as consultant curator on the Crafts Council exhibition, Cotton, Labor, Land and the Body. Uttara is currently the first writer in residence at the Art House in Wakefield, working with the artist Parminder Kaur in collaboration with Corridor 8. And she has most recently been appointed as associate curator of the British Textile Biennale in 2023. So with that, I'd like to welcome Uttara Rajagopal.
Thank you very much, Kristen and Jasmine. Right, so I'm going to talk you through the rationale behind the Art Fund New Collecting Award and give you a little bit of background as to why I felt this project was important and why there was a need for making new acquisitions for the Manchester collection. So let me just move that forward. So just to give you an overview, the Whitworth, which is this building in the middle, is part of the Manchester collections. The Whitworth and Manchester Museum, which is here on the top left of your screen, is owned and run by the University of Manchester. In addition, you've got Manchester Art Gallery, which is down on the right-hand side of your screen, and that's owned and run by Manchester City Council. And these three museums hold collections that represent textiles, represent South Asia, but the way in which these collections have been built up and founded has been through the colonial period. at the Whitworth, they hold approximately 28,000 pieces in their textile collection. They are the second largest textile collection in the UK, the first being at the V&A. And within that textile collection, there is a sizable proportion of textiles that can be attributed to South Asia. Now, I say attributed to South Asia because, of course, the terminology has changed since the time these textiles were collected to the day and age we live in now. And that change in terminology is also reflected in the way in which some of these textiles have been catalogued over the years. So it's still not very straightforward to do a search in this collection or in other museum collections for Indian or Pakistani, Bangladeshi or South Asian textiles because of the way in which historically these pieces have been classified. So having said that, I've put on the screen 3 images to give you an idea of how the textile collection at the Whitworth is typically classified. So they are classified in terms of woven textiles, printed textiles, and embroidered textiles. So on the far left of your screen, you have an image of a woven cloth called mushroom, which is a combination of silk and cotton. In the central section of your screen is a sample of chintz that was part of the Forbes Watson collection of Indian textiles, which comes from a publication published in 1866, which was collected and put together to showcase Indian textiles, South Asian textiles from across the subcontinent for the purpose of the Lancashire mills and for the purpose of the Lancashire mills being able to copy the designs, make them at a cheaper rate, make them more cost effective, and thereby infiltrate the South Asian market. So on each cut sample, you have a detail of what it was used for, how much it cost, where it came from, and you also have technical details which would have been very useful for the actual weavers and manufacturers of the cloth. And on the far right of your screen is a fulkari, and that's an example of embroidered cloth. So as I said, the textile collection is split into woven, printed, and embroidered cloth. Now, it's great that there is a substantial element of textiles that are attributed to South Asia. But when you have a collection of South Asian textiles that has been rooted and founded in the colonial period, you have a problem, because first of all, a lot of these textiles were collected for the infiltration of the South Asian markets to enhance the commercial potential of the empire and to exploit the holdings of land, the people, and the raw materials. So you've got this problematic history. On top of that, as Kristin said in her introduction, you also have a lack of information relating to who has actually made these items, who has made this cloth. And because we don't have details of names of makers in many of the examples, and not just at the Whitworth, it's widespread across many collections in the West, you have to accept there has been a systematic erasure during the colonial period of the makers of these textiles. So there was this great mass of textiles and textile fragments that were coming into Manchester, coming into collections in museums in the Victorian period. And it was really to showcase what the empire held. Now, at the Whitworth, they've always been very mindful of these gaps in the collection and these problems. And I should also say that every single archive has gaps. If I started my own archive today, if you started your own archive today, inevitably there would be things that you would not collect, and that there would inevitably be gaps. But at the Whitworth, they started to address that. And one of the areas they were keen to sort of redress was this area of textile art. And within that, there were many new acquisitions that were made that showcased many Western textile artists. And out of that, Ruby Chishti, who is South Asian but based in America, was also acquired. But that was it. There were also, I should say, contemporary examples of how traditional techniques in Indian textile design were being made, and they were collected from areas in Kutch in Gujarat. But in terms of textile art, there was, I would submit, a really noticeable gap in terms of what the South Asian artists were doing and could offer, and how they could bring together many conversations in the textile collection in Manchester. So in 2017, Maria Balshaw, who was the former director at the Whitworth, spearheaded a project called the New North and South. And through that project, a number of arts organisations were connected across the north of England and across South Asia. And Manchester had this tremendous period of programming of modern and contemporary South Asian art across all three partnership institutions. And it was a great moment for Manchester. And as a result of that project, I made some acquisitions relating to techniques. These are particular examples of muslin jamdani that I acquired for the exhibition Beyond Borders, because one of the artists I was working with, Yasmin Jahan Napur, in her practice referenced a lot of jamdani and muslin, and because there were insufficient examples in the textile collection at the Whitworth, I felt it was necessary to make some further acquisitions in that particular field. However, after the New North and South project, and after the acquisitions of those jamdanis and muslin, contemporary muslin fabrics, I felt that there was still an opportunity to collect textile art. And so I made an application to the Art Fund New Collecting Award. and I pitched it on the basis of focusing on women artists and South Asian contemporary textile art. So first of all, let's deal with the problematic label of South Asia. Who is South Asian? And I think everyone who is in attendance today has had to grapple with many labels. Certainly growing up in this country, I've been Asian, I've been Indian, you know, I've been referred to lots of other unpleasant names, and people of color, person of color, and South Asian. This is just yet another label I feel that we have to deal with. Having said that, I did pitch it on the basis of South Asian. I had to go and look at the United Nations definition of South Asia, who's in South Asia, who isn't. And I made a long list of countries which happily included the Maldives. And I took that to my head of department, and of course they said, Uthra, if you went to all the countries listed in South Asia as part of this award, you would be away from the Whitworth for a whole year, if not more. And then there was I thinking, and what's the problem with that? This is a great opportunity. But no, so we had to rein it in. And so it came down to collecting artworks from Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, and from the South Asian diaspora. And it focused on those areas because Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh map out and directly relate to the largest communities, the largest diasporas in Manchester, in Greater Manchester, and would have been most relevant to the audiences accessing this collection, accessing Manchester, the people who are on the doorstep of the Whitworth. And so the award allowed me to travel to these countries to meet with the artists, meet with galleries, meet with academics, go into art schools, see emerging artists, see practices for myself, and really get to understand some of the difficulties and the cultural barriers, the economic barriers that artists have faced within their own journeys. So what you're looking at here is an artwork by Arshi Irshad Ahmadzai, and this is her largest work to date, which was acquired by the Whitworth, and it represents the spaces that that she, as an having been brought up in an Orthodox Islamic community, has to negotiate. So Arshi is married, and she, up until very recently, lived between Afghanistan and India, but she managed to get out on the last flight out of Kabul and is now living in Germany. And this particular piece, as you can see, has references to script, has references to a particular verse from the Quran that relates to women in particular. And you can see the faceless body, you see the heart, you also see motifs such as the chair and an iron, and you might see roses, etc. And Arshi has spoken about how this relates to both the public and the private spheres, private spaces that women have to negotiate, the spaces in which a woman can feel safe. There is a particular public garden in Kabul that is only open to women, where women could go and converse with one another and speak about their situations at homes, and really bond with each other. But then some of the motifs that she has used may also represent elements that perhaps allude to a more oppressive environment that women have to negotiate within their own domestic sphere. So this particular piece, and like many of her other pieces, is written with a column, a bamboo reed pen, and she has used indigo, and it's written in a very automatic and meditative way. She will start and keep writing, and these are verses and words from her memory of growing up, and memory of her education, memory of her Islamic education as well. So it's a very automatic type of work based on her memory, her experience, and also her lived experiences of different communities and regions. The other work I collected was from an organization called Art Pro. They're based in Bangladesh. This is typical of Kantha work. And the reason why I collected this was because it's all about storytelling, and there's a wonderful naive quality to Kantha work, as you see in this work. And this was done by women collective groups that Art Pro worked with. And the storytelling aspect is very important, not only in terms of textiles, but also in terms of how the Whitworth uses its collections. They do a lot of work with schools, a lot of work with young people. And one of the schools that the Whitworth has been working with is Stanley Grove in Longsight, and 98% of those pupils are from a Bangladeshi community or have ancestry from Bangladesh. So I felt it was important to have something that connected with young people as well as older generations. Rahana Mangi is an artist from Lahore, and this is an artwork that references the technique of cross stitch. And I felt that when I was acquiring textile artworks, it wasn't just about looking at cloth and print and embroidery as such. And I didn't want to collect what people might typically think of as South Asian textiles, which is the wonderful embroidered jerry work, and that has a place. But in terms of this project, I was really focusing on textile art. And the reason why I was so compelled to acquire this was because here, this stitched work has been done with Rahana's hair. And each line is a fragment of hair, a strand of hair. And Rahana draws on her own cultural upbringing, the use of hair in black magic. And it also, I felt, referenced the idea of, and touched on the idea of beauty and identity that women have to negotiate in South Asia and their public and private lives. And hair has a very potent, has a very powerful significance in our culture. The way we style our hair, when we cut our hair, if some women shave their heads, fallen hair has a particular significance in terms of those who are considered beautiful and those who are considered not so beautiful. And aging, as we age, hair falls from our head. But here we have hair that has been removed from the head, and when we think about hair loss, it's a sign of weakness. But here it's a sign of great strength. And not only that, we then enter this amazing and fantastic world of an optical illusion. And from within that world, we can also think about it as a mathematical illusion. And there are so many interesting ways into thinking about how powerful this particular work as a textile artwork speaks to different audiences and themes. Maddy Acharya Baskerville, based in the UK, uses the site of water and boundaries between earth and water, rivers and ocean as a site for collecting her materials, and also as a site for contemplation and thinking about how our lives as South Asian women are connected across the ocean, connected across waters to different parts of the globe. And so here you have this wonderful artwork, which is titled Here to Stay, which is a real play on the diaspora here to stay, a play on the types of racism that people from ethnic minorities have faced. And also, I suppose, the idea of how many families came to this country, perhaps not with the intention of staying and settling in the UK. Certainly my own family did not have that intention, but as time wore on, they did decide that this was a place they were going to stay. And so you have this artwork that speaks to those patterns of migration through found textiles, through cut textiles, and through plastic debris that has been discarded and washed up on the shore. Suman Gujral is another artist that is based in the UK, and this is a work that is based on her late father's handkerchief that he actually carried with him from India to the UK. And Suman's own family has survived and been through and witnessed partition between Pakistan and India. And so this work literally maps out the barbed wire, the partition lines that separate the communities, that separate the land, that is so clear cut from space, as she talks about. And yet, in reality, when we're on the actual land, when we're occupying the actual surface of Punjab, the surface of Sindh, we are forced to keep either side of these partition lines. And so this particular piece has a tremendous poignancy to it and has been titled All My Sorrows. And the colour of it is also very significant because it's this midnight blue. And of course, a lot of people had to make their journeys in the cover of darkness to escape persecution. And as we all know, the horrendous atrocities that were committed during the time of the partition. Kangan Aurora is based in the UK. She was born and brought up in Punjab, and it was important to collect her work because she is sits in this area between textile art and textile design. And so on the left is a fabric that was actually commissioned by IKEA, and on the right is a rug that was commissioned by Floor Story. Both of these pieces are in the textile collection now at the Whitworth. And I should also say that the Whitworth has a fantastic collection of British textile designers and British female textile designers. And one of the most celebrated female textile designers that is about to go on display is Althea McNish, opening this week, at the end of this week. But Kangan Aurora is actually the first South Asian British textile designer to enter this collection. So I'm tremendously proud of that. Bharti Palmer is a British artist of Indian heritage. She's based in Birmingham. Bharti is also an academic, and her piece that is currently on display in the exhibition Exchanges, along with a number of the other acquisitions at the Whitworth, is called Coronavirus in Black and White, and it's an embroidery diptych. And this particular piece is significant in terms of identity of South Asian culture and South Asian identity, because it actually includes in the roundels images relevant to the South Asian community. So at the time, as we all remember, during the pandemic, there were a number of fatalities, very sadly, of those people from the Black and South Asian communities. And these people are essentially commemorated in this particular embroidered diptych, along with some of the politics that were being circulated at the time, politics in India, politics in this country. And it also references the practice of embroidery and samplers, and the great tradition that women grew up as part of their education, learning how to sew to essentially show their identity through stitch. And again, the Whitworth has a fantastic collection of samplers. And on the right-hand side of the diptych is essentially a map mapping out those affected, the cluster groups affected of the coronavirus. And you also see some of the embroidery techniques that Bharti had investigated, the different types of stitches when she was making this piece. Rakhi Paswani is an artist and academic living in India. Again, this is a handkerchief work, which I found really fascinating, and I wanted to create this as a conversation almost between this work and Suman's work, another handkerchief work. You've got this man's handkerchief, widely available for certainly during up until the 1990s, early 2000s, as an accessory that was purchased by men in the open market, in shops. Certainly my late father would always be with a handkerchief. He was never without it, and it seems to be less in circulation now. So Rakhi Paswani decided that this would be a good canvas, if you like, for this work. And in the center of it, you have a pinkish cloth, which has on it hand embroidery of an armpit with underarm hair. And if you think about how a man's handkerchief is secreted on relatively intimate parts of his body, in his pocket against his chest, in his shirt pocket, jacket pocket, or in his trouser pocket, so against his hip or against his groin. And then if you think about the associations we might have with underarm hair, with this type of color coding, with hair, you have this this vision of this man mopping his brow with this hairy armpit in the center. But there is also deep relevance in the type of materials that Rakhi Piswani has used as well. And I should say that this is titled Damp and is part of a series called Abrasion and Erasure. So I thought that this particular piece, although it's been made by a South Asian female artist, it has this fantastic way of looking at dress history, consumption, right across the board, and of course looking at male sartorial dress codes as well. And finally, Yasmin Jahan Napur, an artist from Bangladesh. She lives and works in Dhaka. This piece is called Unity of the Untitled. If any of you came to the Whitworth in 2017 to see Beyond Borders, it was actually on display as part of that exhibition. And Yasmin does a lot of research into the history of the muslin trade, history of the East India Company and how they exploited the land, how they monopolized the industry. And Unity of the Untitled references all those unseen, unheard weavers and spinners, and of course refers to that story that many, many South Asians will know about how the East India Company cut off the weavers' thumbs. And whilst you will not find any written evidence of this, because all the records have been made by the East India Company, it is something that automatically comes out in conversation with anyone of South Asian heritage. Certainly my parents' generation and our family friends, as soon as I say East India Company, they will immediately come out with this information, this story. So here we have gaps in this muslin jamdani. It's all hand woven, and it references this very, very ancient technique that is unique to Dhaka. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That was a really, really interesting presentation, Uthra. Very many thanks. Our last speaker now is Nisa Khan. Nisa Khan will present the transcultural dimension of exchange and artistic networks that offer ways of learning and knowledge production. In 2000, Nisa will mention how she co-funded the Vassal Artists Collective in Pakistan, which is part of the Triangle Network, with Gasworks as a node in London. The project continues to build community and foster creative collaborations between artists in Pakistan, South Asia, and beyond. Nisa will also share 2 recent projects, including Walking in Common, which is a series of podcasts from the field produced as a chain of creative collaborations with different practitioners. Through this performative gesture, she explores how we can create a complex field site of situated knowledge from a specific geography, text, or memory. Nisa Khan's work has been presented in a number of solo and group exhibitions, including the Sharjah Biennial 15, Thinking Historically in the Present, Sharjah Art Foundation, Monsoonal Multiplicities, London, Between the Sun and the Moon, Lahore Biennial, The Sea is History, Museum of Cultural History in Oslo, Manora Field Notes, Pakistan Pavilion 58th Venice Biennale, 9th Asia Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art, Queensland Art Gallery, Gallery of Modern Art Brisbane, Kochi Buziris Biennial in Kochi, Karachi Elegies, Eli and Edith Broad Art Museum, Michigan. Khan received the Prince Claus Award in the Netherlands in 2013. Over to you, Nisa, now, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jasmir, Kristen, and the Slade. I have to apologize in advance because my studio internet might be a little dodgy. So if I blink out, I'll try to switch to, yeah, please stop me and I'll do that. So thanks so much, Jasmeer. And it's really great to present to everyone here, especially the participants. It was just very, very, interesting to hear everyone speak, and so many ideas have come out. I'm really happy to talk about the transnational kind of connections and my practice, and I've worked through that. So I think what I'll do is I'll immediately share my screen. I'd also ask Jasmeer if I could show a small clip of a film, which will be about 3 minutes. So I'll try and do that in the beginning so it's not too disruptive. So here we go. I hope this works. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I really wanted to share a very recent project that that I produced. It's actually works with something that I made about 20 years ago, in fact. And this was henna hands. And so recently at the Sharjah Art Foundation, there's an exhibition called Pop South Asia, curated by Rubina Korode and Iftikhar Dadi. Rubina is at the Kiran Nadir Museum in Delhi. And this really traced the history of South Asian popular culture and looked at it in a very intergenerational and kind of historic sense. So it was very exciting to be able to talk about this project, which I initially produced in Karachi in 2002. And so the two projects that I'm going to share are this one, Henna Hands and its Afterlives, which sort of spans, in a sense, a 20-year kind of gap. And also Walking in Common, which is recently something that's an ongoing project. And then I'd like to share a little bit about my work with the Wasl Artist Collective, and really all of these projects I see as a way of as a woman reclaiming space, as a woman walking through a geography and perhaps many geographies, and really addressing these issues that we've kind of all generated, which are about identity and about diaspora aesthetics, which was so interesting to hear about earlier on. Henna Hands was a project that was site-specific in Karachi, and I felt 20 years on that I needed to readdress this project because it was only documented through photographic images. And what happened was that I lost, I think, a sense of the context and the historical frame was lost at that time. And so I wanted to gather up these ideas and kind of produce a sonic to, in a sense, revisit this project, but through a kind of sensory scape. So I'm going to play a short extract of the film. And just to give you a little bit of context, because really, at that time, it was very much connected to the fraught political history of Karachi at that time, and ideas of displacement within the urban settled communities, and also this sense of the female body within the public space, and kind of looking at the potential of resistance within the public space, how you could create that intervention and kind of talk about issues which are not always easy to talk about. So this project was a kind of my attempt to reclaim that gendered space, and really within the skin of the city through this artistic intervention. So let's hope the video works, and I'm just going to try to play this across your shared screen. It's about 2 minutes.
Why do women's bodies become sites of inscription for such violence? Honor killings, stove deaths, forced displacements, and the countless sexual assaults that go undocumented. In response to the call for a jihad march, I decided to make a march of henna women. These women were marching to their own battle cry against the turmoil and grief of war. They were marching to reclaim their space beyond the mohalla, for safety and freedom, to be visible. As I began to work, I realized that a different set of unwritten rules governed the street. A young girl walked up to me and asked, "Are you Muslim?" At the time, I couldn't fathom why she'd asked me this question, so specific and unexpected. She was told not to walk beyond her own lane. She was aware of the multi-religious dynamics of this mohalla, and perhaps I did not fit her perception of a Muslim woman, walking beyond the boundaries of my own mohalla, without a chadar, holding a camera, photographing these walls that would soon be demolished. In the Dhobi and erased soon after it was made. For a while, the smell of mehndi lingered in the air. The residue remained as part of the wall, marking a different sort of web with graffiti, pan stains, and more party political slogans. This year, small dams overflowed to flood the streets of Sabzi Mandi near the superhighway, creating fish farms in the streets. The monsoon rains have claimed the mohalla again. The mosquitoes and dragonflies are beginning to take over the atmosphere. Rainwater mixes with gutter water to create a reflection, so we can look up into the sky while looking down.
Yeah, I just felt there was an interesting space here for me to come back into this work. And I guess, you know, when you do something which is 20 years ago and you're kind of thinking about its implications, and so this was an opportunity really to kind of create an absence of the henna works on the street because they're no longer there. But at the same time, to try and sort of talk about the issues that expand out of that work. That was a kind of another narrative out of that particular intervention. So I'd like to move on and briefly share a current project which is ongoing, Walking in Common. And this is a series of podcasts from the field, which were produced as a chain of creative collaborations with different practitioners, a journalist, a scholar, an artist. And it was really a performative gesture on my part because I was working at the Center for Research Architecture at Goldsmiths. And during the final year of this program, with COVID and lockdown, it was really difficult to do any fieldwork and research. And so the conversations and the research that I was doing became very much through Zoom and through sort of Skype. And I felt that I really wanted to look at how this particular project, which was really looking at mapping, and it was looking at mapping parts of an urban settlement in Karachi, but it was also looking at the life of this woman, Parveen Rahman, who was shot in 2013. And so in a sense, I was looking at the way that you know, an urban scholar and activist was making this intervention into a very, very large urban settlement of about 1.5 million people, and she was working there for about 2 decades with a number of scholars and architects. And at the same time, what her work and what the impact of her work enabled in terms of advocacy and legal land rights for people. So there was a kind of intense moment of exploring her work and looking at that sense of how you map a city through the body, how you map a space, which is something that I felt I was doing very much as an artist living in London, and also as an artist living in Karachi, because walking was very much part of my practice. It was a way to do research and to also really talk to people on the street and to talk to the community. And so between mapping and looking at the map as an X-ray to the body. And so I decided that, instead of the research becoming a kind of ossified entity within the research program at Goldsmiths, I thought that I would try to spatialize that research and start creating these podcasts, which were quite experimental in a sense, which kind of created counter map, a kind of counter geography in relationship to her ideas and her practice. And I realized also that as practitioners, as a visual artist, I wanted also to sort of bring my practice into that space. I wanted to have these podcasts which would actually put into dialogue the practice of others. And so I created a set of guidelines for the people that I wanted to interact with, so that we could really think together, so we could create a common ground to walk on. And I also felt that, as an artist, my role is very much to create transversal relationships and to find ways of, especially at the time of COVID, to find ways of really connecting to people who were kind of isolated in that space. So there were a number of things that prompted this, the guidelines to collaborate. And one was really the condition of COVID. The other was the idea of location and locality, so that each person who I sort of had this dialogue with really talked about the location in which they were sitting. So it could be that they were sitting in a botanical garden in the port of Spain, as was the case with one artist. They could be sitting within a library. They could be sitting in standing or walking within a space which kind of had a sense of memory, a ruin, an architectural ruin. So there were kind of different ideas which they could physically relate to. And of course, the condition of COVID, but just really responding to their own practice and talk about what they were doing at that time during these 2 years of COVID and otherwise. So the sensory, the locality, and all of these conditions really informed the conversations that I had with different creative practitioners. And I'm going to just, I'm not really going to play each of those podcasts. Those are online and they can be accessed. Okay, let me try and play a little bit of this. So, one of the episodes was talking to Professor Amina Yaqeen, who's at the University of Exeter. And she was talking about the poet Fehmida Riaz, who actually studied film in London and who then went on to really create some quite exceptional work in the 70s, 80s onwards. So I'll play a little part of this podcast if you can hear, hopefully. Let's try this.
Person I think whose work speaks to Parveen's work is the poet Fehmida Riaz, who I've
worked on, and whose work embodies that landscape of Karachi quite a lot. You know, you can hear it in her work, in the poetry that she writes, in the prose that she writes. You've got those.
Okay, I think we might not be able to share much of this, but I'm sure that it can be found later on. So I think I'll move on, but really just to say that, you know, all of these podcasts and the ones that are ongoing are really a way to think about connecting people through different geographies, and really to create a sort of complex field site of situated knowledge, so that in every specific place there's a text or a memory that connects to is thinking about their work, but also thinking about similar conditions that work through these guidelines. And also I think that you know, most of the podcasts, you know, bring forward issues of social and environmental justice, because that was the core of the research that I was doing at Goldsmiths, and it kind of flows out of ideas of that sort of geographical mapping. I'd like to perhaps, since there's not so much time, I'd like to quickly just mention that, you know, working in South Asia and working across in London as well is a really interesting challenge for me also, because I work in different ways in different cities, and different opportunities, especially working with artisans, has been a kind of huge privilege and a learning curve. So, you know, what that brings also is a certain kind of knowledge pool, which I feel I take forward in the work. And that sense of understanding the nature of craft material, and how, as an artist, you know, I can collaborate with different people with different skills, and this is a sort of image of working in Golimar, which is in North Karachi, where I produced a series of maps which were part of the project Menorah Field Notes, and it was a project which was looking at issues of archives of weather history taken from a weather report from 1939, and the project was called Hundreds of Birds Killed. So I will probably just talk a little bit about my work also within teaching and mentorship, and really more than that, the project was the Vassal Artist Collective, which was set up in the year 2000, and it was really to facilitate the mobility of artists between South Asia and the UK, and it is part of an international residency program, still running 21 years on. Interestingly, spearheaded by women. A kind of turning point for artists in South Asia at that time, because Khoj was set up in Delhi, Brito was founded in Bangladesh, Tirtha in Sri Lanka, and the Sutra workshop in Nepal. And this was also part of the node of workshops, which is facilitated through the Triangle Network, with Gasworks in London as a node. I think, you know, we talk a lot about South Asia, and I think there's something interesting to be said here about learning from the global South. And I think that kind of point is very important for me, because I've grown up in London, I've lived in Karachi, and I'm based now in London as well. So it's kind of this idea of thinking about community back in South Asia and also in a city like London is quite challenging. And especially as women South Asian artists, we think about this in terms of the underrepresentation and the lack of opportunities and the lack of access. So Vassal was very much about kind of creating this sense of empowerment for artists and building that community. And it means different things in different places, but certainly trying to kind of find a way beyond government support and how to really, really create a network was something which I feel is very important to think about now in the present moment that we are living in. And perhaps we can come back to this in the Q&A. But, my work within helping to establish the Vassal Artist Collective was really to think about how do we create dialogue when there's so much sort of political conflict in the region and bureaucratic red tape. How do we create mobility for artists? And this is an interesting image because this was the one of the meetings that we had in Delhi in 2000. And I realized at this meeting that I was a woman artist in that network who had children, who was working. And it was a kind of a strange sort of understanding of how hard it is to really have a career in art and have and raising a family and having care responsibilities. So these issues were never really talked about, but I think in retrospect and in this moment, in this wonderful gathering, I think this is the one of the key questions. How do you manage and juggle the responsibilities that you have as a woman, especially from South Asia? So the workshop was not just about international artists, but it was about learning. It was about knowledge exchange on a very kind of mutual, non-hierarchical level. And there were a lot of artists that came from the region, from the UK. And I'm just going to really go through a couple of images. And Shona McMullen very early on came for the Gadani workshop. And the first workshop was in a very remote region, which was Gadani. It was on the Indian Ocean. And, we had 2 weeks of an international workshop with 24 artists. This is way back in 2001. And really this idea of artistic exchange, which was not going to necessarily privilege English as the only medium, but really a visual language that was a way to communicate with each other. And I think the other really important and interesting thing was the fact that the artists were learning from the ground and from the environment. So, whether they were at Khoj in Delhi or Modi Nagar, whether they were at the Brito workshop, all the artists, the international artists and the local artists who came really, really responded to the ground realities. And that became a sort of trigger for all the work that was produced. Christina Mackey worked on these small shelters, which she produced later on at Tate Britain, and she had an exhibition. Clio Lloyd Jacob, again, an artist based now in Cambridge, worked and did a lot of community outreach as well. So there was always dialogue between the community, between the artists, and a very contemporary sort of exchange, because these were ideas which you couldn't access through any other means. Maria Benjamin, who worked in Karachi, produced a series of films within the community, including Beach Boys, and really, really did some beautiful work. And Karen Mirza, Noor Afshar Mirza, as she's now called, and Brad Butler, who worked on the Museum of Non-Participation. This is a project that was taken on by Art Angel in 2009 and expanded in a longer second residency. So, I guess, the reason for sharing this kind of historic project from the beginning, and as it keeps unfolding at the moment, is to say that this kind of intersectional dialogue of artists' practices, of learning, of knowledge production was very at the heart of what we were practicing, in a sense, ourselves. Homa Mulji and Shilpa Gupta produced a really wonderful collaborative project, again, against the political turmoil of the region, which we cannot underestimate. And Riaz Komu, whose work many of you know, he's the person who set up the Kochi Biennial with a group of artists, and that is such an important biennial in the region for all of us. And Chandra Gupta Tenwara, whose work is currently shown at Frieze at his workshop in Koj. So I can actually show a lot of images, but I know that we are short of time, and I will sort of end this with an image of Hema Upadhyay, who was a Mumbai-based artist, and Gordon Chung from the UK, who came for a residency in 2005. So thank you so much. I'll stop sharing my screen, and I hope you heard a little bit of that.
Great, thank you very much, Nisa, for your really informative presentations, and all of them have been really excellent and very thought-provoking too. So that's great. We're slightly running over time, so we could finish at 4:30, which could allow us to think about some important questions for the speakers. So please feel free to type in the chat or use the hands up function as well. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question too.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and answer a question that came through on a direct message to me from Sneha Shah, who asked me about the curatorial strategy and the acquisitions and any institutional difficulties in making the acquisitions. In terms of the strategy, I was really looking at textile art, having traveled to South Asia many times to different art fairs and biennials. I wanted to look at textile art in the form of sculpture, in the form of things that really push the boundaries of what textiles could be. For me, textiles is something that relates and connects to all our lives across all different cultures and histories, and particularly with South Asia, there is just something very, very subtle, unwritten. It's like an eyewitness to all our lives, and has been. You know, I frequently talk about how it's there from the moment we're born to the moment we leave this earth. So I was really interested in particular how textile was being used in the context of artworks. In terms of institutional difficulties, I think with any funding, it's time limited. There wasn't a buyout period, so it had to be fitted in with normal curatorial duties, normal curatorial work. So whilst there was some allowance for traveling and doing the research, going abroad, you had to also balance it with other curatorial duties. And ultimately, like any acquisition, it does go through an acquisition committee. So there were many, many more artists that I wanted to collect. And due to the fact that the funding, the award that I was given wasn't massive, it's brilliant, but it's a start. And so whilst there were many more acquisitions I would have liked to have made, the great thing that came out of it is that it's hopefully going to lead on to more acquisitions in the future. And also it's opened up a fantastic network for me personally in my own practice as a curator, which has allowed me to become independent actually and move out of institutions. And for me, that's been brilliant because it's allowed a greater degree of flexibility, can work internationally with different institutions, different artists. And so it's been really helpful. I hope that's answered some way your questions.
Yeah. There's a question for Uzma in the chat. Could you speak more about the role of the materials that you bring from Pakistan, in contrast to speaking about avoiding identity concerns?
Yes, why I do that is like, for the pattern aspect, like I really love the pattern on it. And it's always different pattern. Each time I go, I can never find the same thing again. So I have whole tubes in my studio of different things. It's different each time. Another thing I forgot to actually mention in my talk was about decoration. Like, I got asked that a lot, even while I was at the Slade in my MA, that my work was decorative. And I actually, I said, okay, if you think that, then okay, then it is. So I actually, I said, I'm just going to carry on like this. And I actually did that. And, and also after leaving as well, I actually, my paintings got rejected because, at that time we used to send slides and all that. I went to pick up my slides from somewhere. And she had written, like, I think she wasn't even discreet. I saw a cross on it and it said decorative on it. So it was returned back to me. And the same paintings were actually in a really nice, really good exhibition, like open call, a year, just like a year, like at the same time, basically. So, I mean, I only do it for that reason, for the like the material. So I steer away from identity or this kind of concern. So it's purely for aesthetic reasons I use it. And the fact that I like painting on it.
Mm.
So that was an important thing I actually forgot to mention. So it's come up in the question, so I've answered that.
Yeah. Especially with the subject of painting and materiality as well.
That's right, yeah. So it's purely for that reason. So, and then it shows on the sides, so you can see the pattern on the side of the, like as if you see the side of the canvas. You can see it, or in the painting. So I hope it's answered the question.
Yes.
Yes.
There's another question to Uthra as well. Is the current collection at the Whitworth digitized? I find that this is a further layer that needs addressing with a number of museum and institutional collections, is that have been distanced from the communities from which they arise, by ensuring access to those who might want to engage, either through artistic responses, learning at all levels of education, and for researchers near and far. We can hope to reconnect and relearn to our material culture.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I don't know if you caught it in my presentation, but I did talk about how the materials, the textile objects themselves have been classified historically. And that has been problematic because it hasn't necessarily addressed differences, cultural differences across and between. It's somewhat been homogenized, and to a large extent, many of the makers have not been accredited, and there has been systematic erasure. Having said that, digitization is very, very important. The new acquisitions that were acquired under the Art Fund New Collecting Award have all been digitized, or at least they should have all been digitized. I haven't double checked that recently, but certainly the information should be there. All institutional collections in public museums are accessible to the public. They are free, and I would encourage you to book in an appointment for a private study session. And yes, there does need to be a greater level of accessibility, but like all museums, they are under pressure with their staff, because many things are thrown at them to be completed in a short space of time. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse for not getting this work done, because it's super important and it should be done, but it will also require funding and people to do the work. So when I arrived at the Whitworth, I was actually recruited as part of a John Ellerman funded project to look at Islamic collections across Manchester, and within that the textile collection. And one of the major problems with looking at what constitutes an Islamic textile is how the geographical boundaries have changed over periods of history, and to what extent some of the motifs and influences have been circulated in other designs. And so when we did the exhibition Four Corners of One Cloth, Islamic Textiles Today, we deliberately had a case that was displayed with arts and crafts textiles, not just William Morris, a whole range of arts and crafts textile designers, but we also had textiles from Persia, as it was then called, from parts of South Asia, to see how the influence and the circulation of different motifs had made their way and been appropriated into the arts and crafts designs. So excellent question. Keep putting pressure on museums and galleries, but just be aware it's one of many tasks that has to be done.
And Kristen has a hand up.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to, it's a question both for you, Rina, and you, Neza. And the starting point of the question is around complexity, I think. So I was interested in Rina, in your movement into the diasporic aesthetic, sort of away from the sociocultural ethnic identity category that you called it, and into this, and your description of the diasporic aesthetic had this beautiful three prongs, but the last one, this plurality of vision that gives an awareness of simultaneous dimensions, which I just thought was excellent. And I was wondering if you could perhaps unpack a little bit about how the diasporic aesthetics allows for this kind of complexity of identity and category. And then Neza, when I jump to you, I'm wondering if you could talk about, I don't know whether you would gravitate toward the word, but as I felt a kind of the complexity of the intersectional, particularly in the project with the city, walking in the city, and women, particularly in these areas. And again, this kind of the way that your aesthetics is kind of working to engage the complexity of the politics in those spaces and places. So it's a question for both of you, but hinges around the complexity and aesthetics.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the understanding is that it's not about kind of linear sort of journey of leaving a sort of ancestral homeland and then being yourself sort of living somewhere else, but this and also this kind of problematizes the relationship between the ancestral homeland and the diaspora, so that it isn't about linearity, nor is it about one having a kind of a premium on the culture, if you like. So with the diaspora, it's firstly, importantly, making the point that a culture like South Asian cultures develop in diasporas in multiple ways that are really significant and shouldn't be marginalized when thinking about kind of the place, the homeland, if you like. And then it's also just sort of allowing for these different generations to develop their relationship over time, and recognizing that, you know, geographically the diaspora needs to be considered more when thinking about cultural spread. And so that's why I think it's really appropriate, because it and allows for that complexity, because it broadens the conceptual category more than this understanding of the original sort of migratory journeys were very much had inbuilt in them this myth of return, where, you know, migrants leave their homeland with a view, like for economic or other reasons, and generally speaking have this view of returning. But, you know, with diaspora, but focusing on diaspora, understands that this is not the case. There isn't a need to return. There isn't a desire to return. And it really allows for multicultural dialogue, really.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. Kristen, yeah, thank you so much for that question. And it's a complicated question because, you know, on the one hand, we're here talking about South Asian women. And also, I think, you know, there's a larger kind of framework of the establishment culture, and also this sense of, you know, the politics of race and the current sort of questions of diversity. There's also the art market, on the other hand, which, you know, has its own engine and moves in its own ways. I mean, it's kind of peculiar how we want to resist the ghettoization of religion, ethnicity, gender, and yet there are artists who kind of feel very empowered by that. I was, you know, looking at the work of Michael Armitage, and just the way he integrates the politics and ethnicities of his native Kenya and kind of brings it into his work in a really powerful way. And I just feel like, I don't know, it feels like a very uneven terrain. It's uneven because of the issues of the market. It's uneven because of the gender kind of disparity. It's uneven because of the sense that, you know, there's a drive to create diversity, and yet there's no follow-up to how that actually happens. And I think that sometimes it can be quite disempowering to have those definitions, because it also comes through the curatorial lens. And I think, you know, as soon as you start to diversify the curatorial positions that people occupy, you know, then you open up a space which is much more, which has much more empathy, I suppose. The strange thing in the 90s and maybe 2000s onwards was, you know, being based in Karachi, you know, there was a very, very exciting engagement with international curators, but just like there was also a sense that they wanted to commodify the work within a certain context of what they thought your identity was. So there's that kind of interesting, process of how, in a sense, you know, to put it very crudely, you know, curators wanted artists coming from the bush so that they had that stamp of ethnicity, they had the stamp of the local, and they couldn't really kind of grasp the fact that artists living in Kolkata or Karachi or Lahore or Dhaka were just as engaged in dialogue with writers, with theory, with the local, with the global. And there was this kind of very, very intellectual kind of engagement with all of these things. And that's something that I witnessed and saw through the artist collective that, you know, that I worked with and set up. So I think that, you know, this complexity has to be embraced, and it's a kind of it's a very, very empowering kind of space to occupy as an artist in the South Asian diaspora. And I think what, the conversations with Uttara and all the others in this forum are so interesting, because I think they point to the sense that, this space is really, really, it's really coming to a point where it's coming of age. It's already come of age, but there has to be a recognition to take it forward through the museum structure, through curatorial projects, and also not to again divide and to learn from the history of Black British art, and what, Rina was mentioning earlier, that there were all of these, there was this fantastic kind of moment in the late 70s, 80s, and then the kind of fragmentation of that moment, which is, as a student at the Ruskin at that time, I was very, excited to sort of witness part of that movement. But again, we are at another crossroads. And I think this kind of idea of a more intersectional approach is very important to keep the dialogue very open. And I think to resist categorization, not just from the institution and curators, but really, really to say that, look, this is who I am. This is what I relate to. I relate to, things in my space, which might be native Karachi or Lahore or Delhi or Bangalore. But I also relate to where I am now here in Britain and the politics of this place and the cities and the places that we walk through and the geographies that we inhabit. So I think that there is a kind of, there's a very, very important moment to redefine ourselves as the artists that we want to be seen as, and not to be ghettoized. I think that is to be resisted.
Mm-hmm. Really great points, and I think that arguably South Asian artists have been marginalised from national art collections, and I'm just wondering, what's your general thoughts about it, about South Asian artists being marginalised?
So I think that we've got to look at like a series of set of different issues. One is obviously about structural racism, and then there are other kind of so there's lots of pragmatic issues, but there's also lots of other really issues about being able to, what Naiza was saying about ghettoization and being able to, I mean, as a writer, for instance, I don't identify myself as a South Asian writer. I identify with being, an academic who writes good work, and it's about quality, really. And what's interesting in my career is I've spent, 20 odd years writing about Francis Bacon, and then a relatively short period of time writing about South Asian studies. But I am now a sort of go-to person for South Asian. No, I'm not an expert in it, but because the face fits, there's a lot more kind of willingness to engage with that. And I think it is really about breaking stereotypes and looking at the work, for what it is. I mean, Leon Wainwright wrote a really interesting study about kind of phenomenology, and looking at kind of just really engaging with the work. And I think if we can sort of, it's not to kind of exclude ethnicity or kind of other cultural sort of other identities, but to look at it almost case by case. And there are some people who aren't particularly interested in identifying with, their work isn't really about kind of what they identify with as a person in terms of those kind of factors. And the work should be given fair hearing, and unless we address issues about structural racism, that's not going to change. And equally, I want to add that I think tokenism is more damaging. So that is something that needs to be gotten rid of. I'm not a fan of, Black History Month, South Asian Month. It either needs to be embedded and tackled wholeheartedly or not at all, because it runs the risk then of just being, tick box exercise and nothing else. So there's a lot that needs to be done, really, at all different levels.
And I was thinking maybe could you expand on how some of you have negotiated exhibition venues, such as exhibitions in traditional galleries or public spaces?
I think in that is like, I'll answer it. I think in that is it's like keep applying for things and not like anything specific, like everything that actually everyone applies to. That's what I do. I just keep applying. And there's a lot of rejection on the way. For a number of years, I actually didn't apply to any open call, like any of the major prizes, nothing at all, like for a good 6-7 years, because I just was just making work actually. That's it. And yeah, and then I thought it's time to apply. So I did that. But it's nice to give a break as well to those as well. Like if you're not getting anywhere and it's like all the things you're applying to are just coming back. So I think that's a sign to just stop for a while and just carry on and like maybe challenge yourself and like change your work. That's what I did as well. Moved around, went to residencies, made more different work, and then I always go back to my work, which the rooms and the interior outside. And I keep going back to that all the time, each way, in a different way.
I just wanted to add something else here, and it's to do with visibility. When I was doing my research to scope out artists who were working with textiles, in South Asia, it was relatively straightforward. Because you've got a lot of galleries out there and art schools who forefront that and are championing that. Over here, it was a different question. It was really hard work. And a lot of the artists here who are South Asian and women working with textiles don't necessarily have studio space, have to kind of work within the home. Some of them have come to this later in life. So it was really quite tricky finding and accessing artists here. And I think the more exhibitions that there are that showcase South Asian artists, hopefully the more we will expand the network and make visible the network of South Asian artists in this country.
Very important to do that, and I was also wondering, Ulsma, if you could tell me about how you've experienced cultural hybridity in regards to different products that you explore in your paintings as well, such as you show maybe Indian products with Western ones, for example.
I think it really helped me when I actually did residency in Berlin, because I was like, again, I was away from home. I wasn't even in London. I wasn't in UK. So actually, really, it was really like, what do you call it? It was actually quite liberating for me. So that's what made me think who I am and what kind of work I'm doing. So that's what I did. I just did what I wanted actually and what came to my head. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Because I remember when, when the Queen's Jubilee and all that, so it was all about being British and all that. So I actually took that as like what they're using as souvenirs, or how they are trying to represent themselves as a nation. I took that and then I compared it to my own, how I see myself. Like certain things, like whether it's things from my house or things I, live with, things like that. That's how I actually work. And then I was in a new country again, and I'm here again. So, you know, it's like, so I think it does help me. The displacement actually helps me. So it makes me think more. It's as if, like, you know, people say, well, how come you're doing this kind of work? Is it homesickness? Is it, what is it, you know, that actually attracts you to do that? Yeah. I just find it really interesting, basically. That's it.
Are there any more questions before we wrap up, or is, yeah. Oh, Nisa, yeah.
Sorry, Sadia also had her hand up. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to what Uthra said briefly, and you know, it's just this issue of visibility is really important, I think, and it's something that is in your title, in a sense. You know, how do we create access? How do we create opportunities for South Asian women artists? Because it's also a very kind of cultural thing, I feel. In a sense, it's a microculture of what in many ways is back home, which is that you have a lot of care responsibilities, and that whole system of care is something which, as a visual artist, I mean, all of us probably in some capacity have had to really deal with. I'm not saying that all of this is only specific to South Asian women. I think it is a particular kind of context, cultural context that we live in, and so I think that, you know, when we look about gender, think about gender inequality and the pay gap, I think we also need to think of a number of other things. One is the fact that I think, you know, South Asian women don't perhaps push hard enough against the system. I think also that when you think about the establishment culture, you know, it's kind of calling for diversity, but it's not opening up and creating those opportunities for women of South Asian descent to kind of enter spaces where they feel empowered, where they can actually make a difference. And you know, there are things just like when you have a gallery opening. I have 3 children, and so every time there's stuff happening in the evening, I think, okay, I either want to be with the kids and cook a meal together, or I leave my house and I'm absent, you know, for the rest of the evening until they go to bed. And those are questions which are quite difficult to negotiate on a micro level. So, you know, why not have openings which happen at 11 in the morning? Things like that do make a difference for women. I know they seem inconsequential, but perhaps they do. I was talking to a young artist friend this morning, and she was saying, you know, Nisa, I went into an opening with my baby in a pushchair, and she said everybody was staring at me, and I felt really, really strange. So, you know, it's these sorts of things with these cultural sort of situations that need to be also confronted on small and large scales. But certainly the kind of wider issue of neglect and lack of visibility, you know, all of this needs to be accommodated within the fold of a practicing artist. You can't say that you don't have care responsibilities, and yes, you can be a, you know, dynamic artist and be everywhere. You have to build it into the fold and the structure of how you are operating in the space. Yeah,
and there's one other question as well.
Unmute myself. Hi. So I've kind of got a mishmash of a question. One was for Uthra regarding the visibility question. So like Uzma, I kind of do all sorts of different art, but not necessarily related to being South Asian, although there are aspects that I definitely practice that are South Asian based. And recently I was approached by a museum who are doing kind of decolonial work. And I run workshops and all sorts of things, but my kind of specialist area is art for well-being and intuitive art. And what I found was they were kind of hoping for a more identity-related thing. But I was really clear. I said, you know, well, you know, this is what my work is. If your work what you're looking for is relevant to my work, then sure, we can discuss this. But if it's not, then, you know, I'm not here to tick a brown person box. And, you know, they came back to me and they were like, yes, we've actually got this project that does fit what you do. And it was fun negotiating the whole thing. But what I was going to say, in terms of visibility, though, for you looking for, you know, South Asian artists who do fabric art in UK or something, do we need to include our, you know, South Asian heritage in everything that we post online or whatever? You know, how would you be found if you don't include the fact that you're South Asian? If you do want to just have your work viewed as your work for whoever you are. So the other part was, how do we encourage more Black and brown artists to actually stick up for themselves and say, you know, I want to be embraced for what I actually want to do in the art field and not just for being a Black or brown person.
So I would say, for the purpose of the Art Fund New Collecting Award, I was very specifically looking at South Asian artists, and I was looking at artists who were comfortable with representing themselves as South Asian and identifying themselves as South Asian. So that was a particular project. In terms of the wider context, visibility of South Asian artists, I think one of the speakers spoke about this being a double-edged sword. You know, you want to be recognized in your own right as an artist, full stop. And actually, weirdly, social media has made that visibility has made it more accessible. I know a lot of artists in my network who are directly contacted by museums and galleries as a result of their social media profile. And if it wasn't for social media, I guess the other way of raising their awareness of who they are, their visibility, apart from doing all the obvious things like websites and things, is to also go to conferences, go to workshops, go to events at the museums, at the galleries, and also other external events. But it is a continuous type of labor, in a way, that we all have to work at. And it's not just the artists, it's the people who are in these institutions. They have to get out there as well and go to these events that other institutions organize. And actually, lockdown, with all its fantastic stuff on Zoom, was really helpful for me personally, because things that were happening in America, things that were happening in South Asia, different parts of Africa, so all of a sudden I was able to listen to these amazing speakers, and I wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to go over there or have the time. So in that way, things that are being done over Zoom, things that are you know, being done over social media, suddenly opens up audiences that you might not necessarily have been able to connect with. So I hope that answers some way.
I just want to add something to that, Uthra, actually, which is a little bit cynical, but in what you were asking, Sadia, to some extent, you can, once you get through the door, even if they've asked you for, you know, your participation for reasons that you might not like, you can always, you know, market yourself and make sure that, you know, if there are any statements that are written about you or any other kind of, you know, copy, that you have control over that, and that you can determine how you want your identity or your work to be written about and disseminated. So, you know, it's that kind of twofold thing, you know, where you can use things to your advantage as a platform, and then once you've built up a reputation, you know, then you have more, well, you would like to think that you'd have more autonomy and control.
Great, lots of interesting points, and I think we'll have to wrap up now. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending and speaking. It's been a really great and insightful event.
Thank you to everyone, Kristen, Jasmir, Lee, everyone backscene, to Slade and the British Art Network for hosting this and for funding this talk. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, everyone. And huge thanks to the speakers and to Jasmine for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.